Hello and welcome to my video where I'm going to show you how to knit a mini pumpkin that you can hang up. In order to make it, you're going to need some DK weight yarn in orange and green. I personally used 4mm straight needles, but in hindsight I would recommend using 3.5mm needles instead. Using smaller needles will make the stitches more dense, which will hide the stuffing better, and it will make the pumpkin a little bit smaller. I made mine perhaps a tad too big. To begin, you need to cast on 10 stitches. I did this using the long tail cast on, but you could use your favourite method. For row 1, which represents the right side or the front of the knitting, you need to do a KFB increase for every stitch. KFB stands for knit into the front and the back, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So do most of the steps of a knit stitch, except don't push the stitch off the needle. Instead, pull the right hand needle towards you slightly and then swing it around to the back. Take it down through the back of the same stitch and do all of the usual steps of a knit stitch. And this time you do finish the stitch. And you repeat this on every stitch. So do most of the steps of a knit stitch, except you don't push the stitch off the needle. Take the right hand needle around to the back, take it down through the back of the same stitch, and complete it like a normal knit stitch. Knit into the front of the stitch, then the back, knit into the front, and then the back, and so on. By the end of this row, you should have 20 stitches on your needle. Then row 2, which represents the wrong side or the back of the knitting, is just a purl row. So make sure the working yarn is towards you and just do purl stitches all the way across. Then for row 3, you need to repeat knit 1 and KFB over and over until the end of the row. So knit 1 and do a KFB increase. Knit 1, KFB, and so on. By the end of this row, you should have 30 stitches. All of the first section of this pattern is just the same techniques repeated: knits, purls, and KFBs. So instead of demonstrating all of the rows, I'm just going to put the pattern up on screen now. You should now have 70 stitches on your needles. For row 19, begin with 2 knit stitches. Then you need to do a K2 tog decrease, which is where you knit 2 stitches together. So take the right hand needle up through the front of the next 2 stitches, like so, and knit them together. Then knit 2 more stitches. Then repeat K2 tog and knit 2 over and over until the end of the row. So knit 2 stitches together, and knit 2. K2 tog, knit 2, and so on. You'll then have 53 stitches on your needles. And then row 20 is just a row of purl stitches. Since the rest of this decrease section is just the same techniques repeated, I'm not going to demonstrate every row, so I'll just put the pattern up on screen. As you can see, you'll have 10 stitches left. Cut off the excess yarn, leaving you with a long yarn tail, around about 1 metre long. Feed this yarn tail into a yarn needle, and then feed it through the last stitches and pull tight. We're now going to seam the edges together using mattress stitch. To do this, you need to go to one side and pick up a couple of strands of yarn, then go over to the other side and pick up another couple of strands of yarn, and repeat this all along the seam. So pick up 2 strands on one side, and then the other, and then the other, and so on. Try and pick up the strands 1 stitch from the edge. You want to always go into the knitting where the yarn has previously come out. Every inch or so, make sure you pull on the working yarn parallel to the seam to tighten these stitches. Once you're about 2/3 of the way along, make sure you add stuffing to your pumpkin. I'm using polyester stuffing. Try and make the stuffing as evenly spread as possible. Once you get to the end of those edges, you'll want to do running stitch all around the top. Pull it tight like a drawstring, just as you did on the other side. Then secure the yarn at the top with a few stitches. Then start wrapping the yarn around the pumpkin to make the segments. I wrap the yarn 6 times to make 6 segments. As you can see, I pulled quite tightly on the yarn because I wanted to squash the pumpkin, but in hindsight I probably pulled it a bit too tight. Just try and keep the segments nice and even. You might notice mine were a bit lopsided. Create a loop in the yarn. Then secure the yarn with a few stitches. If you'd rather add the loop at the end instead, feel free to do so. In fact, it might actually be a better choice. And that's the pumpkin shape completed. You can then decide to add a stalk and or a leaf. To do this, you can either knit them or cut the shapes out of green felt. To make a stalk, you would just need to knit a small rectangle of either garter stitch or stockinette stitch, sew it into a tube, and then attach it to the top of the pumpkin. To make the leaf, take your green DK weight yarn and cast on 3 stitches. Then for row 1, I did a KFB increase. Then I brought the working yarn between the needles to the front and did a purl stitch. And then I took the working yarn to the back again and did a KFB increase. And then row 2 is just a knit row. I'll now put the pattern for the leaf up on screen. Once you've finished row 20, you need to slip the stitches purlwise to the other needle. So take the right hand needle down through the front of the stitch as if to purl, but instead of purling it, you just slip it off the needle, like so. Then do this twice more. Then, making sure the working yarn is at the back, you knit those 3 stitches. Then repeat this process twice more. So slip the stitches purlwise and then knit 3. Slip the stitches purlwise and knit 3. And lastly, you need to do a K3 tog or knit 3 together decrease. So take the right hand needle up through the front of the 3 stitches and knit them together. Then cut off the excess yarn, take the yarn tail through the last stitch and tighten. And then you should have something a bit like this. Then use your yarn needle to weave in the beginning yarn tail. Then use the other yarn tail to attach it to the pumpkin. And that's it, your mini pumpkin is completed. I really hope you enjoyed this project and thank you very much for watching.